everyone. It's Saturday, June 20th, 2026, recorded live from the English Valley's History Center. Here's Jackie.
Hi, my name is Jackie Geringer McDermott. This diary was written by Libby Wade. She was my dad's great aunt, and her full name was Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade. She was 76 years old in 1950. She lived in a house on East Oak Street in North English, Iowa, with her son, Russell Wade. Here's a picture of Lib when she was much younger. November 17th, 1950. Cloudy, misty, freezing on the trees. Really looks a lot like winter. Dr. Miller came about 8 a.m., gave me a shot to prevent pneumonia, and also the cold shot. Will probably be no good for sure for a few days. My blood pressure was a little over 200. Dr. L.A. Mueller Sr., or Old Doc, as we called him, was making a house call for Lib. I gave thanks today for the blood pressure medicines and new medical techniques that make life easier for us now. Lena came down, brought me a vase, a gift from the lodge for 25-year members. There were 11 who received them. Those who live away from here were each given a hanky. Lena Wallace Wade is married to Lib's middle son, Warren or Mike Wade. Lib noted last week that she could be awarded the 2 25-year awards since she has been a member longer than that in the Rebecca Lodge. Here is a picture of Lib receiving the 60-year jewel from Rebecca Lodge later in her life with her granddaughters Hazel Cobb, Evelyn Kurtz, and Belva Yoss. I managed to get dinner ready and wash dishes. Mary R. stopped in, was going to eat us. She stopped again as she went home, stayed until nearly evening. Mary Wade Regseger was an old friend from Green Valley who now lives in town and walks uptown to do her errands. Here is a picture of Mary with her late husband Fred. They are in the back row on the right in this picture with many of Fred's family. Edith Brooke was a hairdresser whose shop was uptown. I worked a little on a crochet pattern. Pretty, but not very hard to make. Mary R. brought one for me to copy. We had oysters for supper. Hattie came over. The Christian church is having a sale at the sale barn. Morses went. Hattie rode this far with them. Hattie Newberry Killian is a friend, and she runs a boarding house on Boland Avenue about a block away. Her nephew, Levon Bursler, is married to Leona Morse, the daughter of Charles and Neva Morse, who gave Hattie a ride this evening. Here are Charlie and Neva Morse with their grandsons Gary and Billy Morse. And here is the sale bill from that sale that they attended tonight. Fall Festival Sale, Friday, November 17th, North English Christian Church will hold its annual God's Portion sale at North English Sale Barn. Livestock, consisting of cattle, hogs, sheep, and poultry. Grain, corn, oats, hay, and straw. Also new and used household goods, hardware, gift articles, groceries, and many other usable items too numerous to mention. Lunch will be served by the Dorcas ladies and will start serving at 4:30 p.m. Menu consists of cream chicken, gravy, mashed potatoes, wieners, baked beans, cabbage salad, coffee pie, cake, and ice cream. Ed O'Brien and Lloyd Graham, auctioneers. R.G. Litzenberg, clerk. Everybody welcome. Anybody wish to contribute and have not been notified, bring your donations to the sale. Russell went uptown. Russell Wade is Lib's youngest son, and she lives in his house with him. My shots are making me feel rather trembly, I guess. Received a letter from Anna. Milan was in Los Angeles when they heard from him. They feel pretty bad about him being gone. Billy is packing up and moving their furniture, etc. Anna Wade Cray is Lib's only daughter, and she lives in Texas with her husband Richard Cray and their 3 sons. Mylon Richard Cray, or Dick Cray as others call him, the oldest son, is shown here with his brothers Burl and Arlen Cray. He's married to Billy, and he has joined the Navy. The reason for the anxiety is that the Korean conflict is worsening. Here is a picture of Billy, the wife of Mylon Cray, in her later years. They had a daughter, Sylvia, who was just a little over a year old in 1950. Today is Abby Moore Smith's birthday. Abby Moore was born in 1897 and was the daughter of William Wallace Moore and Esther Carter Moore, the daughter of Edwin Carter. They were neighbors at Yankee Point. Abby lived in Illinois and later in life moved to Phoenix, Arizona. November 18th, 1950. A nice clear day. So much nicer than yesterday. I didn't sleep very well last night. The doctor said I would be a little sick for a few days from the shot. I did a little cooking, had beef and dumplings for dinner. In the PM, Tracy came for a while. She said Marvin is better and is back at Lackland Field Air Base. Had to have his shoe built up. When she came back from town, Stella was with her. Then Mary R. came. She had just come from Sigourney. She goes down there to the doctor. Tracy Wallace is my paternal grandmother, great-grandmother, and a neighbor of Lib's who lives down on Smoky Row or East Washington Street. Her sister-in-law, Stella Wallace, is the mother of Lib's daughter-in-law, Lena Wallace Wade. Marvin Geringer, shown on the left in this picture, is Tracy's grandson in the Air Force, who has been dealing with an infection in his leg. Judy was here. I am to work a buttonhole in her skirt band. Judy Wade is Lib's youngest granddaughter, Mike and Lena's daughter. Judy was 9 years old in 1950. Lib often does the more technical sewing for the family members. Russell brought repairs for our stool. It hasn't been shutting off properly. After supper, Hattie called. Ruth came down and she and Merlin went to the show. Dick thinks he will get to go to the Oddfellows home December 1st, she said. Ruth Newberry Bursler is Hattie's sister, who is married to Merlin Bursler. They went to the movie theater at the Orpheum Theater uptown. Dick that they are talking about, I think, is Dick Wilkins, and he's Hattie's renter, whose health is declining. There is an Oddfellows home, or the International Order of Oddfellows home, in Mason City, where he may go for more care. This is still operating yet today. Hazel and Melva came up. We're going to town, so had them bring some books from the library. Claudia is the name of the one. Canal Town is the other. Neva Stover said that Harry Phelps liked the last one, so she sent it, thinking that I might. Hazel Wade Cobb is Lib's married granddaughter, and Melva is married to Hazel's brother, Harold or Stub Wade. Here is a picture of Hazel and Stub, but I don't have one of Melva. Neva Hall Stover is the local librarian who is recommending books for Lib to read. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to keep the History Center operating. This includes cataloging of sessions, creating displays, coordinating and preparing for monthly programs, coordinating and responding to requests for family and community histories, keeping up the social media, finances, cleaning, maintenance, and providing treats for programs. There's a whole lot more activity that supports the center operation and is largely contributed through time and effort by the board of directors and volunteers. The History Center board is comprised of Dave Jackson, president, Scott Romine, vice president, Bonnie Romine, secretary, Don Banning, treasurer, and directors Carolyn Elwood, Shelley Gerard, Alan Ackerman, and Dan Best. Please send donations to the English Valleys History Center, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa 52316. We're going to save the next installment in a continuing story that is called Carter, Iowa, and Yankee Point, Part 2, for the next time. Correspondence. Mark Claypool said, Jackie, what a great week. The railroad is the most interesting. I really had no idea that there was that much rail traffic through town. Thanks for your dedication. Susie Allison Lumberg said, watch from home. And Jackie, you never cease to amaze me with your dedication, devotion, knowledge, and presentation. I admire your passion, my friend. I got a funny story from my travels this week. At the theater near Mount Carroll, Illinois, we ran into one of Helen's cousins. I said, are you on the Regseger side of her family? He said, do you know how to spell Regseger? I said, yes, I do. R-U-E-G-S-E-G-G-E-R. And I proceeded to tell him about Mary R., who was a friend of Lib's from the Diaries. I stopped at Casey's in Benton when I was on vacation this week and ran into my faithful listener, Janet Cobb Woodhouse. Here's a picture of us together that I posted on my Facebook page. Janet lived in North English and was in the class of 1962 until the second semester of her sophomore year, when her dad's career move brought the family to Vinton. Our mothers were first cousins. She is older than me and has a keen memory, so I learned a lot. Janet's parents were Milo Cobb and Nellie Van D., and they lived on the Pigeon Road west of North English, close to Glenn and Hazel Cobb, who lived on that road that went south from the Pigeon Road. Milo Cobb, Janet's father, was a brother to Glenn Cobb, who was married to Hazel Wade Cobb, the granddaughter of Lib from the Diaries. Nellie Van D. Cobb, Janet's mother, is the little girl on the right side of this picture. Nellie was the daughter of Lawrence and Ida Van D., who were neighbors to my parents up on the hill south of the present-day Casey's General Store in North English. Lawrence was my mother's uncle because his sister Gladys Keller was my grandma. Some of Janet's friends from her days at English Valleys are Nancy Hahn Williams and Karen Dennis Grove, the older sister of my classmate Connie Dennis Pfeiffer. Janet said her brother Eldrin Cobb was good friends with Jerry Dennis, or Deadeye as he was called. Janet Cobb Woodhouse remembers starting morning kindergarten in North English, and she hated it as she was the only girl. In the afternoon, Lena Wade, Wade's daughter-in-law, oversaw the children who were supposed to be resting and playing while waiting on the afternoon bus to take them home. She remembers that Lena lived in the area, and the students sometimes walked to Lena's home. Following the death of his father, Janet's dad, Milo Cobb, was 16 years old, and he took responsibility for helping his widowed mother, Lila Cobb, which instilled in him a strong work ethic that lasted his entire life. Janet remembers that her mother, Lila Cobb, who is shown in the left in this picture, lived with them at their farm on the Pigeon Road until Janet was 5, when Milo Cobb and Glenn Cobb bought their mother a home on South Walnut Street. Lila Cobb worked at the cafe and took in washing and ironing. Lila also babysat for the children of Dean and Eloise Morse, who lived next door to her. Janet said her own mother was an au pair when she was a teen, which is similar to a nanny to the Elwood children. She said that Dick Elwood was a little boy at the time, and he wanted to marry Nellie. She said that Mrs. Elwood was very good to Nellie. I said my own mother had a similar arrangement with Doris Reese, taking care of her children. Janet remembers attending catechism in North English with Father Duggan. Some of the students were Mike Elwood and Terry Hester. Janet remembers that Lila Cobb's parents, Peter and Emma Hardy, lived at the south end of South Walnut Street on the west side. They are shown in this picture On the left is Lila Hardy Cobb, then her dad Peter Hardy and her mother Emma Long Hardy, and Lila's sister Jessie Hardy Carter. Across the street, about where the medical clinic is now located, lived another set of great-grandparents for Janet Cobb Woodhouse, Louis and Mary Van D, who were also my great-grandparents. I don't remember them, but Janet does remember them driving their Model A to Sunday Mass at the Catholic Church on Boland Avenue. They were such short people, she could just see their heads in the car. And here is a picture of Louis Van D and his great-granddaughter, Diane Bonnater. Now our feature story on Clarence Bonnater, World War II hero. And here's Clarence's graduation picture from the class of 1939 at North English. I just showed you a picture of our great-grandparents, Louis and Mary Van D. Here they are in the front row, shown with many of their children. Their original last name was Van de Kerkhove. My grandma Gladys Keller is on the right, behind her dad, and next to her is her sister, Clara Bonnater. Clara Van D. Bonnater was married to Charles William, or Bill Bonnater. Here is a picture of Uncle Bill Bonnater with his horses. And one of Aunt Clara Bonnater goofing around wearing men's clothing. Here is Bill and Clara Bonnater at the North English Centennial in 1954. Bill and Clara were the parents of two sons, Clarence and James or Jimmy Bonnater. Jimmy was 12 years younger than Clarence. Here is a picture of Clara and their son Jim and Bill Bonnater. The only grandchild of Bill and Clara was my classmate, Diane Bonnater Cassens, who I visited this week in Lanark, Illinois. And here is a picture of Diane in her younger years with her grandmother, Clara Bonnater. Diane's parents were Agnes Mauchka and Jim Bonnater. And here is a picture of Clara Bonnater and Agnes's mother, Sophie Mauchka, at their wedding in 1954 at the Christian Church. 10 years earlier, Jim's older brother Clarence was killed in World War II. This is his story. Clarence Bonnater was born December 31st, 1921, and the family lived out west of town on what is now the highway on a farm, and Clarence attended Gritter Country School. For high school, Clarence came into North English for school and graduated with the class of 1939. Some of his classmates were Bob Plank, Reva Gilchrist, Claypool Wyant, Eddie Holden, Verla Cover Van Aken, and Evelyn Wade Kurtz. He participated in class plays nearly every year. Clarence enlisted in the service on December 12, 1942. Now I will read you some articles written by our local historian and newspaper columnist Carl Hogendorn. Carl encouraged the local soldiers to write to the newspaper, and soldiers were sent a free copy of the North English Record each week. It is reported that Privates Pete Aldridge, Clarence Bonnater, and Arnold Reese have been transferred from California to Pennsylvania. Private Clarence Bonnater writes from his station in North Africa. I have received 4 records since I got in this camp, and I do really enjoy them because it keeps me so well versed on the changes of the good old town. I want to thank you and also the sponsors for sending it to me. I want to thank all my friends for writing and to keep it up. The fellows over here would rather have a letter than 2 meals a day. Keep up the good work back home, and we'll all be back soon. Clarence Bonnater writes from somewhere in Sicily. I've been moving by leaps and bounds. It's very hot here, but cool at night. I've surely seen a lot of the country, and I'm glad that the war is over here and not in the States, as it really messes things up. Keep buying war bonds, as this war is costing plenty, but freedom is what we're fighting for. Please send the record to my new address. Writes from England. PFC Clarence Bonnater writes from somewhere in England, telling some of the things seen on the bus ride. The roads are mostly of blacktop, no ditches on the side, but rather a sort of bank, which is with a trimmed hedge, which looks very nice. Saw several horses, mostly Clydesdales and Shire, and a few riding horses. Sorry to hear about Bob Plank. They have several good dairies here, but the people here haven't had a taste of ice cream for 3 years. The women trade and sell their clothes to each other. Did I tell you about losing my billfold back in Sicily? The other day I got it back with the $42 and all the papers and pictures in good shape after being lost for 8 months. Guess there are some good, honest people in the world and army, too. Helen Wiggins sent me some pictures of the kids in school. Sure brings back memories. Got a North English record. Sure do enjoy them. I'm under quarantine for mumps. Woodrow dropped in here at the office last Monday. Sure was glad to see him. Private Clarence Bonnater was the first North English boy to land in France after D-Day. Private Nick Feldevard landed in Normandy just a few hours after Clarence. And down at the bottom, local boys reported dead or missing in action to date in World War II are John Evans, John Coakley, Floyd Bear, Robert Plank, Chester Finch, John Harry Butler, Von Butler, and Eugene MacDonald. Those 9 were the missing, or the dead, and Leroy Murphy is a prisoner of the Japanese. Leroy Murphy was able to return. PFC Clarence Bonnater wrote editor Carl Hogendorn that he has been in the front lines each day since D-Day. He says the French people have greeted them happily, giving them fresh milk and cider. They have captured many prisoners, most of them young Austrian boys. His last words in the letter were, "Well, Carl, must close, as I have no lights in this foxhole. Really enjoy getting the letter. Clarence was killed in action a couple days later." And before the family got the news of Clarence's passing, this article appeared in the record. PFC Clarence Bonnater, with the 1st Army now in Germany, recently sent his folks a German helmet, which he had picked up in Normandy. The helmet has no bullet holes in it, but has little nicks that probably were made by shrapnel. The name on the sweatband showed that the helmet had belonged to a Nazi named Steinbach. Ninth man from North English to lose life in war. Clarence Bonnater killed in action September 24th in Germany. North English, PFC Clarence V. Bonnater was killed in action in Germany on September 24th. Word to this effect has been received from the United States War Department by the deceased soldier's parents, Mr. and Mrs. William Bonnater. He is believed to be the 25th Iowa County young man in his nation's armed forces who has lost his life in World War II. He was serving with the United States First Army. 22 years of age and a graduate of North English High School, PFC Bonnater was inducted into the service on December 12, 1942. Clarence died at Aachen, Nordheim, Westphalian, Germany. Clarence was buried in Belgium until 1947, when his remains were brought back to North English. Funeral rites held for PFC Bonnater, killed in France in 1944, buried Thursday with full military rites. Hundreds of relatives and friends gathered at the Christian church on Thursday afternoon to pay their last respects to one of our war heroes, Private First Class Clarence V. Bonnater. The remains of Iowa County's first returned war dead arrived in Marengo Wednesday morning, being met by his parents, Mr. and Mrs. C.W. Bonnater, and an honor guard from the Ross Hadley Legion Post. Final rites were held for PFC Bonnater Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. In charge of Reverend Glenn Parrott of the Methodist Church, he was assisted by Reverend Albert Billingsley. Reverend Parrott, in his sermon, pointed out that the returned soldier had made the greatest sacrifice possible, and that it is now the task of the living to see to it that Clarence and many others did not die in vain. Long before the services began, Clarence's friends had filled the church to overflowing. Music was furnished by a quartet, Mrs. A.C. Schollenthaler, Mrs. Bruce Warner, George Gilmore, and Reverend Parrott. Accompaniments, Mrs. E.B. Warner. Full military rites for a fallen comrade were conducted at the graveside by the local American Legion. Pallbearers were the 6 boyhood friends and army buddies of Clarence: Arnold Reese, Ed Holden, Otis Holton, Woodrow Chittick, Clifford Smothers, and Marvin Aldrich. We heard about Clarence while we were growing up, and we heard that he was very smart, and his picture continued to hang on his parents' wall at their house in North English, where Diane and her parents, Agnes and Jim, moved to be with his aging parents. Clarence's family continued to grieve his loss. I was a frequent visitor in their home, as Diane was one of my best friends and still is today. Diane remembers her Grandma Clara would not watch anything about the war except for MASH. The mementos that Aunt Clara and Uncle Bill had were passed on to Diane, and here is what we now have at the History Center. His Purple Heart, oops. His Bronze Star, and there's a sharpshooter pin on there too. There's a picture of his buddies that has their names marked on the picture by him. The group picture from when he departed from Marengo. And the flag that his parents kept in their window when he was gone. The German soldier's helmet was also in Diane's possession, but she could not bear to keep it, as it belonged to a deceased German soldier, so it was sold at Agnes Bonnater's estate sale in North English in the early 2000s. In 2019, before COVID, Diane Bonnater Cassens traveled to Europe to find the cemetery where her Uncle Clarence Bonnater had been buried for 3 years. She was amazed to find the beautifully cared for cemetery that is still the resting place of 7,792 American soldiers. Clarence Bonnater's name is inscribed on the 1st Infantry Division monument in Aix-Chapelle, Belgium. And there's Diane at the cemetery. When I and my classmate Helen went to visit Diane this week in Lanark, Illinois, she sent these items to the History Center. She also showed me the wicker rocker her grandpa Bill Bonnater used in their living room, beautiful crocheted items from her grandma Clara Bonnater, and some tiny mementos from grade school of her grandfather Bill Bonnater that were sent to her from her cousin Connie Dennis Pfeiffer. And a sample of a rug that she uses every day that her grandmother weaved. A couple of years ago, I also uploaded to Ancestry.com the last letter that Clarence wrote to his cousin, Mary Jean Van Dee, or Jean Johnston, Mrs. Ward Johnston, before he was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. Clarence and Jean were very near in age. I also uploaded a funeral card from Clarence Bonnater's funeral. And now I'm going to also upload his graduation picture. The next alumni luncheon will be at the Main Street Pub and Grub in North English on August 31st. Please contact Alice Dramer or Linda Carter for seating. The next program at the History Center will be Sunday, June 28th at 2 p.m. at the History Center. Mike Williams from Kyoto will be presenting Automotive History, a Personal Obsession. Mike is a retired teacher from Kyoto. Our sympathies today to the family of Joan Cobb Vinton. Joni Cobb was a member of the English Valleys High School class of 1972 and a childhood friend of mine as she lived over on Cherokee Hill across the park from us. We are also interested in learning about historical English Valleys items that you might wish to donate to the History Center. Please contact Dave Jackson, Scott Rowline, or any board member to donate. Thanks, and we'll see you all again next week.